The Lives of the Saints by Father Alban Butler. February 15th, Saint Claude de la Colombière. An artist, a contemporary of Claudio, has left us a portrait, painted when he was between 35 and 41 years old. Elongated face, small but bright eyes with a penetrating gaze, broad forehead, well-proportioned mouth, and a somewhat sharp chin. It is said that when Claudio entered the Society of Jesus, he was rather robust, of a very cheerful character, of high ideals, prudent and pleasant. Religious life only developed these natural gifts. His innate intelligence became accustomed to intellectual curiosity and to sharp and accurate judgments. Claudius loved the fine arts and corresponded with Oliverius Patru, a member of the French Academy, who praised his writings highly. But these natural gifts would have had little value in the work for souls if the blessed had not united to them the interior spirit of a religious thirsting for the glory of God. The source of his interior life was union with God in prayer, to which he constantly gave himself. He became so accustomed to referring everything to God that human respect and worldly motives did not exist for him. This extraordinary detachment from the world was his main characteristic. Blessed Claude was born in Saint-Symphorien d'Auzon near Lyon in 1641. His family was well-connected, pious, and well-to-do. We do not possess any special information about his life before he entered the Collegiate of the Society of Jesus in Lyon. Although he felt great repugnance for religious life, he managed to overcome it and was immediately admitted to the society. He made his novitiate in Avignon, and after 2 years went to the college in that city to complete his studies in philosophy. After completing his studies, he was assigned to teach grammar and humanities from 1661 to 1666. Since 1659, the city of Avignon had witnessed constant clashes between the nobles and the people. In 1662, the famous encounter between the papal guard and the entourage of the French ambassador took place in Rome. Following that incident, the troops of Louis XIV occupied Avignon, which was in the territory of the popes. However, this did not interrupt the work of the college, and the rise of Calvinism only redoubled the zeal of the Jesuits, who devoted themselves with greater zeal to apostolic ministries in the city and in the surrounding districts. When peace was restored, Avignon celebrated the canonization of Saint Francis de Sales. A great liturgical function was held in the older of the two convents of the Visitation. On that occasion, Blessed Claudius displayed for the first time his gifts as an orator, for although he was not yet a priest, he was one of those chosen to preach the panegyric of the holy bishop in the convent church. The text he chose was, "Out of strength has come forth gentleness," and the sermon turned out to be magnificent. In the meantime, the superiors had decided to send the young Claudius to finish his studies of theology in Paris, the center of intellectual life in France. In that city, he was entrusted with the honor of looking after the education of the two sons of the famous Colbert. What probably happened was that Colbert discovered Claudio's intellectual stature and chose him for this important office, even though he personally was no friend of the Jesuits. However, the relations of the Blessed with that distinguished family ended badly because a satirical phrase that Claudio had written came to the knowledge of the minister, who was extremely offended and asked the superiors of the society to send the Blessed back to his province. This could not be done until 1670. In 1673, the young priest was appointed preacher of the College of Avignon. His sermons, on which he worked intensely, are true models of the genre, as much for the solidity of the doctrine as for the beauty of the language. The Blessed seems to have later preached the same sermons in England, and the name of the Duchess of York, Mary of Modena, later queen, when James II inherited the throne, in whose chapel Claudius preached, is linked to the editions of these sermons. The Blessed, during his stay in Paris, had studied Jansenism with its half-truths and its calumnies in order to combat from the pulpit its errors, animated as he was by the love of the Sacred Heart, whose devotion would be the best antidote against Jansenism. At the end of 1674, Father Lachaise, the Blessed's rector, received from the general of the society the order to admit him to solemn profession after a month of spiritual exercises in the so-called third probation. This retreat was of great spiritual benefit to Claude, who felt, as he confessed, called to consecrate himself especially to the Sacred Heart. Blessed Claudio added to the solemn vows of profession a vow of absolute fidelity to the rules of the society, even in the smallest details. As he noted in his diary, he had already lived for some time in this perfect fidelity, and he wanted to consecrate his conduct with a vow to make it more lasting. He was then 33 years old, the age at which Christ died, and this inspired him with a great desire to die completely for the world and for himself. As he wrote in his diary, "It seems to me, Lord, that it is time for me to begin to live in you and only for you, for at my age you wanted to die for me in particular." 2 months after his solemn profession, in February 1675, Claude was named superior of the College of Paray-le-Monial. On the one hand, it was an exceptional honor to entrust to a young professed the government of a house. But on the other hand, the small community of Paray, which had only 4 or 5 fathers, was insignificant for the great gifts of Claude. In reality, it was a matter of God's design to put him in contact with a chosen soul who needed his help, Margaret Mary Alacoque. This nun was in a period of perplexity and suffering, due to the extraordinary revelations of which she had been the victim. She was in a period of perplexity and suffering due to the extraordinary revelations of which the Sacred Heart had made her the object, which became clearer and more intimate with each passing day. Following the indications of her superior, Mother de Saumaise, Margaret entrusted herself to a very learned priest, but who lacked knowledge of mysticism. The priest ruled that Margaret was a victim of the devil's deceptions, something that finally disconcerted the saint. Moved by Margaret's prayers, God sent her his faithful servant and perfect friend, Claude de la Colombière. Father La Colombière went one day to preach to the community of the Visitation. "While he was speaking to us," wrote Margaret, "I heard in my heart these words, 'Behold the one I have sent to you.'" From the first time Margaret went to confession to Father La Colombière, he treated her as if he knew what was happening to her. The saint felt an enormous repugnance to open her heart to him and did not do so, even though she was convinced that it was God's will that she entrust herself to the Blessed. In the following confession, Father La Colombière told her that he was very happy to be an occasion for her to overcome, and immediately, says Margaret, "Without doing me the least harm, he laid bare all that was good and bad in my heart, consoled me very much, and exhorted me not to be afraid of the ways of the Lord as long as I remained obedient to my superiors, reiterating to me to give myself totally to God, so that he would treat me as he wished. Father taught me to appreciate God's gifts and to receive his communications with faith and humility." This was Father La Colombière's great service to Marguerite Marie. Moreover, the Blessed worked tirelessly in the propagation of devotion to the Sacred Heart, for he saw in it the best antidote to Jansenism. The Blessed did not stay long in Paray. His next occupation was quite different. On the recommendation of Father Lachaise, who was the confessor of Louis XIV, his superior sent him to London as preacher to Mary Beatrice d'Este, Duchess of York. Claude preached in England by example and word. Love of the Sacred Heart was his favorite theme. The beatification process speaks of his apostolate in England and of the many Protestants he converted. The position of Catholics in that country was extremely difficult because of the great hostility against them. A movement was formed at court to exclude the Duke of York, who had converted to Catholicism, from the succession to the crown by replacing him with the Prince of Orange or some other candidate. The infamous Titus Oates and his henchmen invented the story of a plot of the Papists in which Father La Colombière would be involved with the rest of the Catholics. The plot was aimed, according to the slanderers, at the assassination of King Charles II and the destruction of the Church of England. Claudius was accused of exercising priestly ministries and of having converted many Protestants. Although he was taken prisoner, the intervention of Louis XIV prevented him from sealing his life with martyrdom. The Blessed was simply banished from England. Prison had taken its toll on his weak health. On his return to France in 1679, the Blessed was already mortally ill. Although at times he recovered a little and was able to exercise his priestly ministries, a kidney disease prevented him from resting. His superiors, thinking that the native airs could help him regain his health, sent him to Lyon and Paray. During one of his visits to the latter city, Marguerite Marie informed him that he would die there. Indeed, after having given a marvelous example of humility and patience, Claude La Colombière gave his soul to God on the evening of February 15, 1682. It seems that the following day, Saint Margaret Mary received a message from heaven that Claude was already in the Glorin and did not need prayers. Father La Colombière was beatified in 1929.